Thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda, papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for the public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record the meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. There is no one. To ensure the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silence. Welcome to those in attendance. I now ask Mrs. Gibbons to introduce the officers.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Kelly Gibbons. I'm the Development Manager that's leading today. To my left, I have Georgina Coley, who's our Legal Advisor, and to my right, Katie Jones, who's here on behalf of the Local Highway Authority. Item number 6 on the agenda will be presented by Simon Rouse, who's to my right. Item 7, Heather Carlisle. Item 8 will be presented by Jack Dyer, and item 9 will be Item 9 will be presented by Elsie Morgan. Thank you.
Okay, we move on to item 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies for Councillor Dan Powell and Councillor Gennard. Are there no other apologies? Then I move on to item 2, which is name substitutes. I have no names of substitutes and I see no substitutes. So we'll move on to declarations of interest. Can you indicate if you wish to declare an interest? And I will call each councillor in order. There's no one declaring an interest, then I'll go on to... Oh, Councillor Thomas, sorry, you had notified us of your interest in the last item. Right. Can I move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of October. Are the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of October, please members raise their hand if you approve of them. Those against? Abstentions? For those who I believe were not present at the time. Sorry.
Chair, can I just add my name was spelt wrong in the minutes?
Oh.
My surname was.
Oh, right. Right, that's covered then. Can I say that on Chairman's announcement, we have 2 items at the end of the agenda, which are not necessarily confidential, but we'll come to that later in the agenda. Can we now move on to, can I request that the public speaker, please speaker in this particular occasion, for the agenda item 6, join the meeting. Mr. Mee, please can you take your seat at the front of the public participation tables. Good. I welcome you to the meeting and will call you to speak following the presentation of the application. The application before us concerns 50 Bar Courts Road, Herefordshire. Can I ask the officer who will be making the presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Rowles.
Just waiting for the slides to come up. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this application relates to 50 Bars Court Road in Hereford. The property lies within a residential suburb of the city, albeit very close to the main commercial area and to the train station. The existing 6-bed house of multiple occupation is a 2-storey semi-detached house with additional living accommodation in the basement and the attic. This application proposes to change the use of the property to an 8-bed HMO and to extend to the rear by way of a single-storey flat roof addition. Next slide, please. Okay, so the plan at the top of the slide reflects the position of the existing HMO within a row of closely sited period housing within relatively narrow plots. There is limited frontage space and no off-street parking due to traffic calming measures that will be evident in the photos that conclude this presentation. Next slide, please. The plan on the right-hand side reflects the modest scale of the proposed single-storey addition to the rear and the fact that some external communal garden space would remain. Next slide, please. Okay, the plans are fairly rudimentary, but I'll whiz through them. This slide shows the existing and the proposed rear elevation. It's probably not too evident to you, other than the bottom corner on the right-hand side. You can see what is essentially going to be a single-storey projection from the rear, which will be clearer on the next slide. If we can go to that next slide, yeah. Okay, so this is the proposed northwest elevation, which illustrates the extent of the proposed addition. It would measure 6 metres long and 2.7 metres tall. You can see there's a large window evident within the extension, which would serve as a means of escape in the event of a fire. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's just from the other side. That will be pushed up against the boundary with the neighbour at number 51. So there's no fenestration on that side. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the existing ground floor plan with what is described as the back room. That's proposed to be changed into another bedroom. Next slide, please. And this is the proposed floor plan at ground floor with the extension shown to comprise another bedroom at the back there off the kitchen and utility. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, for information, this is the first and second floor layout, which accommodates 5 bedrooms in total. It would also shows you that there's a basement living area. Whilst concerns were previously raised about sort of cramped accommodation within the roof space, this is already in situ, and this revised application proposal is recommended for approval on the basis of a condition limiting occupancy to 8 people only, and therefore single occupancy per bedroom. There was a previous appeal decision here, which is referenced in the officer report, and that is a significant material consideration. If we go to the next slide, please. Okay, just the photos, just to show you the front of the house there, taken at slightly different times in terms of the upper two. So you can see that shrubs or hedgerow in front of the basement light wells has now been removed, allowing sort of some degree of outlook and some habitable room daylight, I guess, to that communal living space. The slide at the bottom is obviously the rear, looking from the end of the rear garden space towards the back of the house. The officer recommendation is for approval subject to conditions as set out in the committee report, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they arise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, can I ask that invite Mr. Mead to speak in objection to the application? You have 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me now? I can hear myself. Good morning. My name is Brian Mead. I'm a resident of Hopton Road, and I can confidently inform you that I represent many of the residents in the road and in the properties near to 50 Bars Court Road. I can convey their opinions on this planning application. I can do this because I've spoken to many people who have signed objection letters recently submitted to you. As far as community values are concerned, I, like many others, I've lived in Hopton Road for a considerable amount of time, and I have been there since 1984. We've raised families in a small city road of terrace houses. It's a family-orientated area. Reason why I object, On-street parking is one of the big issues. In non-office hours, Hopton Road fills to capacity. There are motorists who, during late nights and weekends, ignore notices that the parking is for permit holders only, especially when there is no prospect of being ticketed by traffic wardens. Can we assume that more tenants will bring more cars? Yes, as the likelihood of an individual owning a car today is more likely than not. Also, this doesn't consider visitors to the HMO tenants adding to the vehicle numbers unless it ever came by that was a 24-hour parking patrols looking out for illegal parking. Plans submitted would see a large reduction in the garden area at the property of number 50 and other properties, and impact many homes with increased noise pollution, which is a big factor in that particular area. Summer evenings do get spoilt by noise. Noise is generally generated by HMOs and student accommodation nearby. Families do not generate a lot of late night music sessions. The plans submitted are very much interpretation. They're very much rudimentary and can be interpreted by the landlord in the ways he does things. Can we assume that any assurance from the landlord that any judgments or guidelines from planning would be adhered to? No, because it's already facilitating parking through existing parking bollards on Barnes Court Road only, which I think is not been given any planning permission. The intention was always evident the landlord wanted to fill the property to capacity and then add more capacity. Reject this proposal to extend the rear of the property. Consider the greater expansion of lets in the property does not promote social cohesion and could alter the well-being of a very established and good neighbourhood. This is a clear case of profit before people. I'm talking about the residents have been there for many years, taxpayers, and I'm therefore asking the planning to cap the numbers at number 50 and to prevent further moves to create a greater number of HMOs in the area and to present capacity as acceptable, not proposed. So I'm just saying to stay as it is, if we could possibly do that, please. Thank you. I think I've gone over my 3 minutes.
No? Yeah, all right.
Mine shows 3 minutes, 20 seconds, so I'm not adhering to your rules, if you let me go on.
Yeah. It was when you started the final after we'd sorted out the microphone. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Can
if
I
you could take your place back in.
Okay, thank you.
Right, we now go to the local member. The local member for this board is Councillor Proctor, who, as many of you know, has shingles. So that's last Friday. He will now be addressing us online. Councillor Proctor, you have up to 10 minutes.
I hope I won't. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can't tell anything. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, I hope I won't need the full 10 minutes. So this proposal refers to a property in a dense block of housing in the southeast corner of my ward. The block is bounded by Barscourt Road to the south, Ayleston Hill to the east, Pengrove Road to the north, and Hopton Road to the west. Hopton Road is a short road with terraced properties on either side. Barscourt Road features larger properties on the north side and the railway land on the south side. Ayleston Hill features a number of larger properties. And a number of properties on Barscourt Road and Ayleston Hill are already converted as HMOs or are in the process of being converted. And it's easy to see why. The properties tend to be larger and the location is very close to the city centre and to the county hospital. I'd like to draw the committee's attention to three key issues with regards to this application. First, parking. There is considerable pressure for parking in this area. Parking is not permitted on most of Barscourt Road in this area and is not permitted on Ayleston Hill. Parking restrictions on the north end of Hopton Road require permits at any time, and in the southern end of Hopton Road they require permits between 8 and 8. Parking restrictions on Pengrove Road near the junction with Ayleston Hill require permits 8 to 8. Further along Pengrove Road there's very limited on-street parking available, though many properties there have drives. If you visit this area in the evening, you will typically see that every available parking space is already occupied. Each property in the area is permitted up to 2 permits per property, and it's therefore argued that increasing the number of people resident at the property will not increase the number of vehicles parked in the area. But that's not the experience of local residents, as you've heard from Mr. Mee. Vehicles will want to park in the area because they are visiting local residents, undertaking deliveries. Perhaps someone will be taking a works van home overnight, or because a resident may own a car even though they are not eligible for a permit. And it is well understood in the local area that parking enforcement is infrequent and does not take place around the clock. Increasing the number of residents in the area will increase the pressure on the extremely limited number of parking spaces and should be resisted. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the requirement to promote safe and healthy communities. College Ward is notable for being extremely densely packed in Herefordshire terms and for lacking any appropriate community facilities. We have no pub, cafe or community centre and nowhere to promote opportunities for social interaction. Despite this, the sense of community in streets in my ward is very strong. People know and look out for their neighbours. They recognise when people have not been seen for a while and they check on each other. There are many settled individuals and families, and where the turnover of people moving into and out of an area is slow, new residents are welcomed and included in the local community. As the number of HMOs in the area grows and less investment is made in community spaces, the higher number of people moving into and out of the area will begin to impact community cohesion. You might feel that adding 2 more residents to an existing HMO will have marginal impact on social interaction, but this should be seen both in the context of an ever-increasing density of HMOs in the area and the absence of any community space with which to promote social interaction. We should not be increasing the density of the population in this area at all without addressing the needs of the community space. And finally, outdoor space. Gardens in this block are extremely small. This extension will heavily reduce the outdoor space available for residents of this HMO, and residents who wish to socialise in the outdoor space will have to congregate towards the end of the garden, and that will inevitably mean they'll be closer to properties on Hopton Road, which have very small gardens, and will not be able to relocate within their gardens to avoid any disturbance. In summary, HMOs are an important part of the housing mix for Hereford, but they do inevitably increase the density of housing in an area that is already densely populated. It's not realistic to believe that increasing housing density will not also increase the pressure on parking in the local area. And given the lack of any community facilities or opportunities for people who would not normally mix to come together in the local area for social interaction, increasing the density of the population, even by a small degree, is likely to reduce the sense of community cohesion in the local area. If you do approve the application, I would support the conditions proposed in the Planning Officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. You will have the opportunity to sum up at the end of the debate. Right, I'll move on now to the actual debate in itself. Can I have anyone who wishes to start the debate? Councillor Foxton, then Councillor Baker.
Perfect, great. Thank you for the presentations. I have a neighbouring ward to Elston. I've got Iron Hill. We have HMOs, and parking is such a problem. And I'm constantly being contacted about parking both from residents and from the letting places. So I'm very, very aware of that. And even though we say, well, it's just 2 extra here, they're in very confined space. And it looks as if the space is pretty confined as it is, without taking away garden space and then adding 2 more people to it. That's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was interested to read, when I first had a look at this application, that a similar application was refused last year for an additional 2 bedrooms and a rear extension. But that's now been clarified, and if this is approved, then it will be restricted to 8 residents. Whether they're all single sex, I really don't know, and don't really have much experience of going into HMOs, but I can imagine this one being so close to the new university and close to the hospital that we're probably looking at students and possibly nursing staff or hospital staff. which I suppose at that level, then you're not going to be too bothered about having limited space where you live, because you probably won't be in there very often. In my experience as a young soldier years ago, we were all lumped in together, so this could be seen as quite luxurious. But anyway, the new extension on the back will I understand, include one new bedroom and a new kitchen and utility room. We were told on the presentation that Hopton Road's name kept popping up. I don't really know where that is, but it's not part of the application site, so should we be considering that? I don't know. We were also told about the limited space in the rear garden. Looking at the photograph of the rear garden, it was, I suppose politely you could describe it as an eyesore, and possibly this extension leading into the garden may well end up tidying that space up. But it doesn't look from the photograph as though many people were sitting out there having evening canapes. We were also told about limited parking spaces, that there virtually is no, you can't park in Bars Court Road, it would appear. And if you want a permit, then you have to go into Hopton Road. But if they are single people, students, etc., the chances are they probably don't have a car. But we don't know. But they're not going to live there if they can't find anywhere to park. And so it's one of those things that if this is allowed, then we're going to assume that there will be 8 people with cars living there, and they will have to find their own level. But I don't think that's much of a problem, having looking at 2 additional people. So with that in mind, the officer's recommendation is for approval, and I would support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I too represent a ward that has a fair number of HMOs in it. Although I think many of us are unhappy with it, we have to accept that HMOs do provide a very valuable source of housing. Single people, particularly single young men, are very low on the pecking order for social housing, and they're expected to find their own. This Bars Court Road is within easy walking distance of the city centre, the railway station, the colleges, and I think it does provide required accommodation, whether we like it or not. So I would say I would support the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. I had the experience of 10 years of living in Ryland Street in Hereford, for which those of you that know it well, it's an area that has a lot of HMOs, sort of increasing number actually. I completely understand the frustrations of Mr. Mee and local residents, but I have to say that the 2 areas that he particularly raises with regard to parking and noise, we do have ways that we can look at trying to control those concerns, particularly with perhaps increase of enforcement of parking in the area to make sure that there are regular patrols. With regard to noise, we have the environmental health officer who, if you're experiencing noise issues, we can address through there. And I agree with my colleague, Councillor Andrews, that there is a need for housing in the centre of Hereford that does have a density element to it. So I would be looking to support this application, albeit reluctantly.
Any other speakers? We have no proposer or seconder. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Simmons, are you proposing the...
I think Councillor Baker.
Councillor Baker and councillors.
Yeah, so I'm happy to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation.
Second.
Yes.
Councillor Baker. Right. Can I now go to the officers? Any comments from... No, done. Then I go to the local member.
Thank you for the debate, members. I guess there's not much more to add. I think everybody, including myself, accepts that HMOs are an important part of the housing mix. This is not, local residents are not objecting to the existence of HMOs, merely to the continued expansion of them. With Councillor Baker's comments on the garden. I think I agree that that's not the most desirable outdoor space, but the residents of this property have no real control over that, and that is the space that they will have to socialise in, and it will be reduced by this application. And I note Councillor Simmons' comments about there are additional or alternative ways that the council can mitigate some of these impacts, and it would be very nice if those actions were taken. Thank you for the debate.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal proposed and seconded. Can I ask those in favour, please, of the recommendation as outlined in the report? I think that's unanimous. Yep, right, then that is carried then. I was going to have a break at this particular point, but we've dealt with this fairly quickly. Perhaps we can do that after the next item. Which... All right. Okay. Can I... Sorry. All right, we're just going to swap officers for a moment now for this item. We could hardly have a break in that quickly. Could we? Can I now move on to item 7 on the agenda? The item is Park Hall, Wormlow, Herefordshire. Proposed a demolition of a former Park Hall ballroom and reception area. For 5 dwellings and 15 timber holiday lodges, reception area and associated works. Can I ask Miss Carlyle, the officer, to make the presentation? Thank you, Miss Carlyle.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, and also thank you to members of this committee who attended the site visit yesterday morning. This application has been redirected to Planning Committee by Councillor Fagan, the neighbouring ward councillor. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to the update sheet in regards to 2 minor typing errors and also to the procedural matter in regards to the fact that no garage floor plans nor elevations were submitted for the 5 detached dwellings. Just so members are clear, the garages have not been considered within this application, so a new application would need to be submitted to secure them. The garages are also not included within the description of development. The application site is identified in the usual manner by the red star. This is a full application for the demolition of the former Park Hall ballroom in Wormlow and the erection of 5 dwellings and 15 timber holiday lodges, reception building and associated works on an area of 0.5 hectares of brownfield land. The application in front of members this morning is recommended for approval with suitably worded conditions as detailed at the end of the committee report. Next slide, please. This slide helps with context. The application site is located within the village of Wormlow, which lies about 6 miles south of Hereford and about 6.5 miles northwest of Ross-on-Wye. The Park Hall, which was a dance hall and entertainment venue, was destroyed by fire in 2004, and the site has been derelict and vacant for the last 18 years. The site of the former Park Hall ballroom comprises of a large hard surface area which serves several existing residential properties, a farmstead and a retail store which is now closed, as well as the redundant Park Hall ballroom. The site is located in close proximity to existing services with a local pub directly opposite, a garage opposite, as well as a village shop and post office to the southeast. There is a bus stop opposite the site entrance which runs a regular service between Monmouth and Hereford. The site is not located within a conservation area nor within a protected landscape and is located within flood zone 1. The existing access into the site serves the existing residential dwellings as well as the retail unit and properties and units rear of the site. There are substantial trees on the site which are covered by an area tree preservation order, and the site has a public footpath MD13 which runs through the site, and this is part of the Herefordshire Trail long distance route. Adjacent to the site to the west is Brynwyn Manor, which is a Grade 2 listed Gothic manor house. The application site also falls within the Brynwyn Unregistered Park and Garden, albeit the site itself has significantly changed post-1950 due to the erection of the additional buildings and warehouses. Brynwyn Manor and their care home also have their own vehicular access. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed site layout and the illustrated landscape plan showing the location of the holiday lodges and dwellings, as well as the play area and the attenuation pond, road access and landscaping. The car parking in the reception building is also detailed. The existing, as in the existing retail store. The lodges are located within the yellow oval area. The proposed 5 dwellings are located within the purple area. And the existing retail unit now vacant is shown within the red area, but to stress, this is outside of the application site. The principle of the proposed uses falling within tourism and residential on the site is detailed within 6.8 to 6.32 of the committee report. Next slide, please. As members who attended the site visit yesterday will be aware, there are substantial trees on the site and, as detailed earlier, are covered by an area tree preservation order. This slide shows plans which detail the area covered by the historic TPO. Both the council's landscape officer and tree officer have been actively involved in the application process. The site is not within or adjacent to an AONB natural landscape designation, and the application and proposal itself is underpinned by a landscape and visual impact assessment, which has assessed the direct effects of the proposal on landscape resources and the indirect effects on the public perception of landscape arising from the change, or as a result of visual impacts. Your officers are also in receipt of a no objection from both the landscape and the tree officer on the proposal, and the report has specific arboricultural and landscape conditions added. Next slide, please. As advised, there are no heritage assets within the application site. However, this slide shows the location of nearby assets, both designated and non-designated. When considering the impact of the development proposal around the setting of heritage assets, there are several stages. This has been detailed within the committee report. The site is not within a conservation area, nor does it contain or adjoin any designated heritage assets. The nearest heritage asset is Brynwyn, and this can be seen on the slide within the map highlighted by the blue marker. This is Grade 2 listed and was originally a house and now residential flats. Please see the photograph on the left-hand side to illustrate this building. The lodge to the Gothic manor and its ornate gate pillars can be seen in the photograph on the right-hand side and is detailed on the map by the yellow marker, and this is considered to be a non-designated heritage asset, but again, this is also outside the application site. The site is within an unregistered park and garden, but as advised by the Council Historic Buildings Officer and detailed in the report, there is no objection nor any harm identified by the proposal on the aforementioned heritage assets and non-heritage assets. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed building designs for both the holiday lodges and the reception building. They are proposed on the northwestern part of the site. As confirmed in the report, the design of the buildings are considered to be acceptable, taking into account the wider setting and the features of the landscape. The lodges will be single-storey and constructed from timber. The lodges will be 2 or 3 bedroom units to offer a choice of accommodation sizes to suit various tourist needs. The mix is 5 2-bedroom lodges and 10 3-bedroom lodges. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed building design for the 5 detached dwellings located at the southeast of the development, adjacent to existing residential development. As with the lodges and confirmed in the report, the design is considered to be acceptable. The properties have been amended during the application process to now provide 3 and 4 bedroom properties. Regarding the design for the 5 units and the 2 house types, Type C, there's going to be 3 times 3 beds, and Type D, 2 times 4 bedrooms. Next slide, please. This slide assists with context and background in regards to the local road network and the site. There is a public right-of-way which crosses the site, MD13, and this can be seen on the top right-hand plan and annotated by the pink line. Visitors will have ready and immediate access onto the PRO network, and as the PRO intersects the site and in turn links up with other routes and walks. The PRO officer has not raised a principal objection to the proposal, albeit they have commented that the path runs through the site and should be at least 2 metres and should not overrun the estate road. When looking at the impact of the highway network, this has been covered within the committee report at paragraphs 6.33 to 6.43. The application site is currently served by an existing vehicle access, and this is being improved as part of the proposal. This is off the A446 and in close proximity to the junction to the B4348. Members will note that as part of the submission, the applicant has provided a detailed transport statement as well as the transport plans, and after concerns raised by both local residents and the local highway authority, further amended plans and additional information has been submitted, including traffic surveys. Highway officers following the reviewing of these details have now confirmed acceptance, subject to improvements to connectivity in regards to drop curbs, which are detailed on the plan, as well as increasing visibility displays. The photos assist members who did not attend the site visit yesterday and show the access in the site, the middle photograph, and the immediate context. Next slide, please. In regards to other matters as detailed in the report, the site proposes an attenuation pond which can be seen on the southeast corner end of the site. Drainage colleagues and Welsh Water raised no objection in both regards to both surface water and foul water, which is going to be connected to the public foul sewer. In regards to ecology, the application has been supported by an ecology report, and ecology colleagues have reviewed the proposal and raised no objection. This also addresses protected species, which has been raised by a number of local residents. Conditions have been added to secure ecological protection, including all biodiversity net gain and habitat enhancements and management. Natural England have also confirmed acceptability of the HRA. This slide also demonstrates the close proximity of the application site to neighbouring properties to the southeast of the site and to the northwest. Noise and residential amenity is a key issue, and the impact of neighbour amenity in the form of noise and nuisances addressed within section 6.52 to 6.60 of the committee report. The Environmental Health Officer has provided no objections subject to mitigation in the forms of submission of a site noise management plan and the erection of an acoustic fence to the northwest. Can I refer you to conditions 3 and 4 of the committee report? These are pre-commencement conditions. Members who attended the site visit yesterday made an observation in regards to the close proximity of the proposed residential dwellings to existing residential properties. As highlighted at the start of the presentation, the proposed garages are not being considered, and officers are satisfied there are no concerns in regards to the siting of the proposed dwellings in regards to privacy or overlooking to neighbouring properties. Officers are confident that the impact of noise and other amenity issues, including disturbance, can be appropriately mitigated against or can be controlled by the use of appropriate conditions. I confirm again, environmental health colleagues have confirmed no objection. Next slide, please. This slide shows the derelict Park Hall, which is being proposed to be demolished. The dance hall and entertainment venue was destroyed, as said earlier, in 2004. Removal of material related to the fire and its demolition is covered by planning condition 6 and detailed within paragraph 6.111 of the report. The Park Hall building has now become considerably run down in recent years, and it's due to being unsafe is now cordoned off. Can we move to the next and final slide, please? To sum up, the application seeks full planning permission to demolish the derelict Park Hall ballroom and erect 5 detached dwelling houses and 15 holiday lodges and reception building. As I've highlighted, and it is evident in the report, there are no technical objections to the proposal, and the principle for both the residential and lodges is supported, as is the demolition of the derelict Park Hall building. Your officers have assessed the proposal against the development plan, and the scheme is considered to accord with the relevant policies and found to be representative of sustainable development. There are no material considerations that are considered to outweigh the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and your officers are also mindful of the benefits of the proposal. As such, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the appropriate conditions detailed within the committee report. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Carlisle. Can I apologise? I should have invited the public speakers, Ms. Cook and Mr. Rogan, please, to take their seats at the full public participation, please. Sorry?
Sarah Rogan.
Rogan.
Sarah.
Sarah Rogan. I didn't say. Okay, right. Can I invite Ms. Cook on behalf of Muchbirch Parish Council to speak? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and councillors. The development of this mainly vacant brownfield site is welcomed, but Muchbirch Parish Council objection is in relation to the erection of 15 holiday lodges. One would typically expect to see such schemes in areas adjacent or within easy access to some form of natural landscape, such as coastal or woodland. The site is bordered by residential housing, commercial enterprises, and a nursing home for people with disabilities. The site layout plan shows that the holidaymaker drives past the planned residential properties and suddenly the lodges appear. There is no sense of arriving at your holiday destination with welcoming views and anticipation of a lovely rural setting. The need to maintain access through the site to accommodate the commercial premises and a working farm means the site layout has had to be designed around these limitations. This has resulted in the lodges being placed in a cul-de-sac setting, which gives it a semi-formal layout as opposed to the free-form layout one would generally associate with such developments. It would seem the applicant wishes to maximise the space, hence the cul-de-sac setting, but this has resulted in the lodges appearing to be crammed in with little personal outdoor space. An outcome of this is that for over half the lodges, the outside terrace area overlooks the cul-de-sac access road. This is hardly the view one would expect to see if staying in a rural holiday lodge. Staying with the outside space, a play area is included, with your officer's report determining this to be small. It is deemed to be at the centre of the site, but that is the site as a whole, not specific to the area of the lodges. The site plan indicates space will be defined by hedgerows. These will act as a safety barrier between the play space and the main access route to the commercial properties, and also to give privacy to the 2 adjacent lodges. This means, however, that parents cannot keep an eye on their children when using this space, which may be of concern. The smallest of the area would not appear to allow it to be used for general socialising, as pub garden type bench seating would need to be sited. This would be as well as presumably some natural play equipment. In summary, the Parish Council feels that the holiday lodge aspect of the application is out of keeping and in conflict with the surrounding area and of poor design. Holiday makers with children would surely not expect to be so close to other residences, commercial businesses and working farm traffic. Added to this is the lack of open space for the lodge residents and no on-site amenities such as a clubroom cafe. The Parish Council would respectfully ask you to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now ask Mrs. Rogan to speak on behalf of the application? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. The Planning Officer has produced a very comprehensive report. As such, you will note that the Local Highway Authority, Lead Local Flood Authority, Welsh Water Landscape Officer, Ecology Officer, Tree Officer, Historic Buildings Officer and Environmental Health Officers raised no objections. Park Hall has been unused for 19 years following a fire and is now in a very sorry state. For those that might not be aware, Park Hall Ballroom welcomed thousands of people weekly throughout its heyday, catering for live music, social gatherings and wedding receptions. The site before 2004 was once a vibrant setting of happiness, memories and laughter. I can imagine many of you visited in your time. I feel now is the time for Park Hall to turn the page and enter into a new chapter. My vision, passion and drive is to rejuvenate Park Hall from a burnt-out, derelict building and grounds into a new era called Park Hall Grange. Beautifully landscaped to include 15 high-quality timber lodges whilst building 5 new houses. Park Hall Grange will welcome visitors to our scenic countryside of Herefordshire, a place where people can visit, relax and unwind at a leisurely pace within a woodland setting and also support our local economy within Wormlow. Both the proposed holiday lodges and the 5 dwellings will support the local pub directly opposite the site, shop, post office only 30 metres away. Bus stops lie in close proximity to the site, with regular services to Hereford. There are a variety of local footpath networks for holidaymakers to explore the area. We truly believe the proposal is in a sustainable location. With our proposals for sustainable energy, we are providing a holiday location to reflect its natural setting amongst the preserved trees. The proposal is for family accommodation, and one of the lodges on the western boundary will be solely dedicated to SAFA, Help the Heroes and similar charities. This will provide much needed tranquility and downtime for themselves and their families. Providing accommodation for veterans is a personal offering, as both my husband and I have served within the British Army. We are aware of some concerns regarding disturbance from local residents, and we are happy to provide a detailed noise management plan, which will ensure the site will be managed to the highest standard by my husband and I, 7 days a week, with an out-of-hours on-call from 10 p.m. till 8 a.m. Living a short distance from the site, we can be available to resolve any issues in the unlikely event they arise. We are happy to commit to quarterly meetings with the local residents throughout the proposed development. I understand there may be local concerns, and change can always be difficult in any community. However, the site is in a neglected state, and there will be significant enhancements both in terms of biodiversity, but also in visual terms, alongside bringing economic benefit to the area. We very much hope you can see the level of work and commitment made in producing the proposal, and I hope you can support the Planning Officer's recommendation to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could now take your seats in the gallery. Thank you very much. Do you want to take your seat? That's all right, you can do it from there if you like. Yeah, that'll be all right. Right, Councillor Richard Thomas is the ward member, and Tony Fagan is the adjoining ward member. The application site has a material effect upon the adjoining ward. Both will speak now and will have the right to speak at the end of the debate. Neither will have a vote in the application, on the application. Councillor Thomas, you have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I doubt that I'm going to take 10 minutes. Very strange yesterday going to Park Hall. I have very fond memories of Park Hall. I just remembered and said to other members, when I was 18, I became chairman of Allensport Young Farmers, and I had to stand up there and speak in front of 200 young farmers and farmers. Very daunting. A year later, I got married, and my reception was there. So, to some extent, it's quite sad to see it. But when this proposal is the first thing, it came into my in-tray only a week, or probably less than when I became a councillor. I looked at it, and I have to say at the time I had some concerns. But since, obviously, I have spoken to local residents, I've spoken to the applicant and also the officers on the site visit yesterday, I can see a lot of merit in this application. Some people were somewhat concerned about the holiday lodges. Now, we as a committee must support tourism under E4, and this is what we should do with this. It's going to obviously make a difference to the local pub, the local shop. There are transport links, everything really fits. And some people concerned, I say, about the lodges, but we, at the end of the day, the applicant is taking her financial risk, and it's really not for us to make a comment on that. As regard the objections, if you look at the objections, there's a great number, but most of or a lot of them were actually brought forward by Simply Stunning. I think the owner of Simply Stunning at the time put in 3 or 4 objections, his wife 2. Every member of staff was obviously persuaded to write an objection. I've looked and read every single one, and I think there are probably 3 people that have objections which have a little bit of merit, but the most important one, which she felt it would affect her business, is actually 2 miles away. I think that, let me put my, right. Houses which we actually not really talked about, they're desperately needed in the area. And I'm very glad that our planning officer managed to negotiate to make sure that we had some 3-bedroom houses. So that is definitely a plus. Noise, well, I think the applicant has satisfied us that she is prepared to put screening in, because as we noted yesterday, there are a home for adults up in the top corner, and I've been, obviously it's in my ward, I go there and I put my leaflets through doors. It's an extremely quiet area, but I don't think, I think with this screening, I don't think that is going to be a problem. I noticed that Much Birch, it's a strange one, because obviously one side of the road is me, my ward, and the other side of the road, the Much Birch side, is Much Birch Parish. Much Dewchurch Parish Council originally had an objection to it, but they have since reviewed it and are now supportive of it. Because again, they feel it would actually benefit the community. So I then really will be, hopefully you will all support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Can I now, Councillor Fagan, who is with us online, can I ask now that you make your comments on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And the reason why I've asked this to come to the Planning Committee is that it obviously has a huge impact on the area. This does sit in Councillor Thomas's ward and within Much Dewchurch Parish, but it also sits on the edge of Much Birch Parish and Lanwarn Parish. And the A466 and B4348, which join at Wormelo, is a very important local junction serving a lot of people in the area, particularly the bus services, the bus service from Monmouth to Hereford, and then also all local bus services, and particularly school bus services, all meet at that particular junction. So I think everybody welcomes the fact that work is planned for the site. It's long overdue, and there's long been speculation about what would happen on the site. And I realise that the applicants have had enormous challenges to find a viable option to develop the site. But I think that there are still concerns. I know that both Lanwarn Parish Council and, as you've heard, Much Birch Parish Council are, they are not supportive of these plans, and they don't feel that the concerns that they raised have actually been addressed. I think that the fact that there are 35 conditions in order to get this permission over the line is quite concerning, and particularly given the difficulties that we face in enforcing conditions. So I'm not quite sure how do we have so many conditions because the application is not actually quite ready to to be able to sort of meet all the necessary conditions to get it over the line. And you know, in that case, perhaps it needs to be looked at a little bit further before we actually agree this. So there are certainly concerns about that. And I think also in terms of the scale of the tourist cabins here, the 15 tourist cabins, there certainly been a lot of objections about that, and I think not only from the sort of occupants or staff of Simply Stunning, there have been quite a lot of objections from parish councils and also local residents. And one of the issues around that is the fact that the 15 lodges coming under a sort of tourist designation means that there will be no S106 contributions that arise from the development of this site. And I think given the scale of the development, that is quite concerning. I know that there is talk of dropped curbs outside crossing the B4 348 to the 2 bus stops, but I'm not entirely sure that drop curbs are enough. I would quite like to have some clarification. Are these going to be actual pedestrian crossings, which are really what are needed at Wormelo, or are these just going to be dropped curbs? Because I think that's an important point. And I think issues like the children's play area. Now I know that will specifically serve the site itself, but the residents of the home for disabled people next to the site regularly used to walk up Tump Lane to use the play area that was available in Tump Lane, which sadly is not there anymore. Hopefully will be with another application. But there is a need for some sort of play area in the vicinity that is actually accessible to all residents, not just those tourist occupants of the site. And I think the point that Much Birch Parish Council made about the site being not suitable for tourism is one well made, because actually there is no, you know, there are no tourism facilities in Wormelo. Let's be honest about it. There's a pub, and the pub would benefit, and there is a small shop. But in terms of tourism facilities, there aren't any. And so actually creating better facilities on the site that actually provided better activities for families and were accessible for local residents would certainly sort of enhance the attractability of the actual site, and potentially not cramming so many units in to the point where acoustic fencing needs to be put up on, you know, what is actually quite a rural site, to protect the residents, the neighbouring residents. That I think that more work needs doing on that. So I've talked about also the viability of 15 units is quite concerning for those who actually have tourist accommodation within the local area. It does feel like there's a saturation of the market if we add another 15 units on, and I'm not quite sure if there's been any consultation on this, or, you know, if in Herefordshire do we have sort of restrictions on how many tourist units you can provide, and do we have the necessary studies to quantify that, because tourism is an important contributor to the local economy, and if we completely saturate the market, we don't actually do any of our existing businesses any good. So I've discussed the impact on the local highway. I think there are some concerns also around the internal road and the ability for heavy goods vehicles and tractors, which will be using that road to access behind the site. I know it's a private road, but there will need to be passing facilities for heavier goods to pass on that site, and also the importance of the Herefordshire Trail, and I don't think that this has been addressed. effectively that internal road will become a much busier, much narrower road. And at the moment, the Herefordshire Trail crosses through there, but it's a very wide area for walkers to navigate with other vehicles. And I don't see any facilities for that accommodate the Herefordshire Trail across the site. So we've heard from Much Birch Parish Council about their concerns, and also just obviously there have been concerns from people about the environmental impact, and I realise that the proposals do have taken those into account, but quite a lot of concern locally about colloquial evidence of great crested newts, which haven't featured in the environmental consultation taken, and also obviously a lot of different sorts of roosting, breeding and foraging bats. So we need to make sure that those environmental aspects are taken into concern. So I think largely the concerns are, under policy SS6, the environmental quality and local distinctiveness. Is this the right kind of development, given the scale of the development, the 15 units? Is it the right kind of development in terms of environmental quality and local distinctiveness, the impact on local amenity, particularly the residents of the care home adjoining the site, and the scale of the development is what is causing most concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Well, now both the local members will have the right to sum up at the end of the meeting. Right. We'll now go on to the debate. Can I have?
I actually felt, thank you for the report and thank you to both speakers. You have to go to the site to actually feel the possibilities of what should be needed there. And it was very sad to see what has happened 19 years ago. Some of my colleagues, as we've said, have spent many happy hours there. I think I would support this application because I think it would benefit the local economy. I have heard said that it might take business away from others, but we are looking to all the time look towards tourists coming in. And once we start to get more tourists in, we can then see what do they need. Because we can't assume they need this, that and the other. Let's bring them in and get their opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I found their site visit very useful yesterday, not being old enough to remember the old setup. And I thank the officer for her presentation and the very comprehensive report she's produced for us. No doubt this is a very good use of this site, and it's a derelict site, and in fact the old dance hall, whatever they want to call it, was suddenly sort of disappearing into the scenery. I had to look twice to find out where it was. In fact, I asked the officer, where was this dance hall? And it was right behind me, and you could hardly see it. But I think that it certainly needs looking at. The other option would have been, I suppose, a housing estate on the site. That would have been the only other option. But I think some these lodges, I think they're going to bring much needed tourists and visitors to the county. We've heard from objectors that it's an unsuitable location for holiday lodges. Well, that's very subjective. Not everybody wants to live surrounded by countryside or the seaside or whatever. Some people are quite happy to go on holiday in a place like this where they can get on public transport or in their cars and go and visit other areas. And so it's subjective. And we heard about the lack of Section 106 contributions. Well, that's unfortunate, but it's the rules. Nothing much we can do about that. And we were told also about the viability of the site. Well, that's not a matter for us. That's a risk for the developer to take, not something we should consider. I think with this business about garages not being part of the application, maybe we could put an informative, if there's not already one in the report, to just remind the developers that if they want garages there, they will have to apply under a new planning application. What I did find really quite impressive were those magnificent trees on the site. I don't know what they were. Were they? No. Redwoods. Magnificent. I've not seen many trees like that where I came from. And I think once that site is opened up, these trees will become more of a feature, which would be something really quite impressive to look at. And so, with that in mind, I fully support the officer's recommendation for approval.
Councillor Toynbee.
Thank you. Yes, following on from what Councillor Fagan said, I think it's a really useful reminder to us of the Herefordshire Trail, which is a relatively new asset to the county and something that we really need to be aware of as a committee of where it goes and what a potential attraction it could be and how we can best increase its value and protect it. I've just got two questions which slightly follow on from what Councillor Baker was saying. Firstly, how common is it for garage plans not to be included in the original application? And secondly, on the trees, it's very good to know that the tree officer has been, very actively involved in this, and that we've got tree root protection in the conditions. In paragraph 6.73, it says that the nature of the area TPOs mean that only trees which were in existence at the time the order was made are protected. And because this order is now 44 years old, it's likely there will be some ambiguity as to which trees are protected. In paragraph 6.77, it says that this plan does retain the existing key site trees, and as I've said, I understand about the root protection, but have the trees that are going to be protected been identified? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Toynbee, for your questions. In respect to the tree, the tree protection zones, that there is as I say, the condition is quite prescriptive in terms of additional detail to be submitted, and that will come through at condition stage in terms of protecting that and identifying them, because you are right in terms of when I showed on the presentation there, and if in terms of members who were on site yesterday, there's a large number of mature specimen trees, but also there's there's sort of shrubbery and landscape that sort of has evolved over the last sort of 30-40 years. So that will be tied up in terms of conditions, which will then be, once submitted, that will then be shared with the tree officer for them to formally review and to ensure that they're comfortable with that in terms of that. And sorry, in terms of your other question was in regards to the garages. The garages, sorry. Yeah. Again, being fully transparent, that was an oversight from myself. From in terms of the planning agent didn't submit it. In terms of it wasn't picked up, unfortunately, by my support team. It also wasn't picked up from me as the case officer. So I did try and contact the planning agent yesterday to see if we could get some parameters in respect to doing a condition. So, as I say, it's not the usual situation. It's, as I say, no elevations or floor plans were submitted, but they are detailed on the site plan. And that's why, as I say, in terms of the update list, that was brought to your attention, and I think in terms of an informative is a good suggestion to add for that. I don't know if any other officers got anything to add.
No. Okay, Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Chair. Simmons. Thank you very much, Heather Carlisle, for your excellent report and talking us through the site visit comprehensively yesterday. I share some of the concerns of my colleague, Councillor Fagan, with regard to this site. I can completely see the need for something to happen on there. I would have preferred to have seen further housing on there, which attracted some affordable housing element and some Section 106 for the local community. Wormlow is a vibrant community. As we said, it's got good transport links, it has a pub, it has a thriving cricket club, a shop. It's very unusual to have all of those things, and it would have been an excellent place to have developed more housing. I have no comment on the long-term viability of the holiday lets there. I have real concerns about the Herefordshire Trail, having been part of the team that was responsible or involved in the launching of that back in April. And I would like to see that there is specified space along that access road that doesn't bring pedestrians into conflict, although I do appreciate that the current state has them walking along that road, but it is a much wider space than is proposed for the new access road. However, that has been addressed. My other concern is the layout with regard to the sort of subservience of the existing houses on the southern boundary with the new three-bedroom properties location on the southern side of that access road. But again, the garages are coming through as a potential Section 73, hopefully, or some other form to look at their height particularly, rather than having any sort of carports with building space above. I wouldn't want to see that coming through at all. I am concerned about the acoustic barrier requirement on the western elevation due to the sensitive noise receptors there, but the excellent report does explain that our officers have considered that and are content with that, so I don't feel there's very much more to add there. Yes, I think I'm slightly torn, and I'll just wait to see if anybody else has further debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent report. Thank you. Thank you for their presentations from the Parish Council and from the applicant. Very comprehensive, and from the ward councillors as well. I wasn't on the site visit yesterday, unfortunately, but I do know the area rather well, and I regularly cycle past it as part of my weekend activities, and consequently I think this would be an ideal location for the holiday lets and supporting cycling in the area, because it is a fantastic spot to use as a central location for that type of activity, and would enhance it. Also, I think it would benefit the Hereford Trail as a starting point for people to actually explore it and enhance that capability of the trail, which is a fantastic element of our countryside. And consequently, I would like to support this application, and I recommend that propose that this application be accepted. Thank you, Chair.
Is that a proposer of the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a seconder before I move on to the next bit? Councillor Baker. Right. Councillor Stone and then Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel generally Thank you. The equipment starts to deteriorate, and then the question is who's responsible for maintaining it. On holiday lodges, I've got mixed feelings about them, Chairman. Some members, including Councillor Fagan, may well remember visiting a site in my ward for a lot more holiday lodges than these 15, and in the village of Little Hereford. That was in 2021. And here we are at the end of 2023. They haven't even started constructing them, and the site is still looking pretty empty. So I think we need to keep a careful eye on that. On the other hand, with this application, there are houses being built as well, which I think is very good. And also Wormlow has got a shop, pub, and there's a good bus service and transport links. So whereas in Little Hereford there was no similar infrastructure. So I think there is a good sporting chance that these will go ahead, but we need to watch out for that that possible scenario. So generally I'm supportive of this application and thank the officer for a very comprehensive and thorough report. I just hope that the people who eventually move into these holiday lodges will also feel part of the local community, and who knows, one or two of them might even play in the village cricket team. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton next, and did Councillor Foxton indicate? No. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say that I'm quite familiar with the Wormlow area. To say that I was playing cricket one afternoon when it went up in smoke. On the kennel field I was playing away, and there's a bellowing smoke when it was burnt down. I've got to take on board Councillor Simmons, sorry. You get it right, he's got me on there. Councillor Simmons' point that while I'm very supportive of development there, we are very short of rural accommodation across the whole of the county. Affordable housing for people that work in the farms and our agriculture as well. And the development of it, I would have liked to have seen certainly use for that purpose, putting in affordable houses and homes in that area. It is something that is, to me, I'm both ways at the moment in this instance. I think it's a good idea because the land needs using. It's been derelict for a long time. You know, I'm a Herefordian born and bred. I've spent many a Year's Eve in Park Hall when it was going and things of that nature. And it was a very vibrant area, as people have said. But it does need redeveloping. And we are talking about holiday lets and holiday homes and things of that nature. And it's not long ago that we commissioned some at Garway, not far away, on top of a hill. I recall being part of a meeting. So when I look at the other side of the coin, I'm disappointed that it's not rural housing. I'm disappointed there won't be 106 money to help the community develop the area there. It's a nice village. There is development going on at the moment where the shop is. There were new houses put in there. There's development on Tump Lane at the moment, which is not far away. The garage doesn't have petrol pumps, but it is a mechanical garage. It doesn't not a petrol pump garage. But there is a nice community out there. And I've played cricket at Wormlow from there, and the village people around there like it a lot. It is a community, and I understand the Much Birch Parish Council putting in objections to it from their point of view. Much Dew Church, they're happy with it, and I can understand that because they're quite encouraging Much Dew Church that they do try and promote things throughout their area. And I'm torn really, but if I'm being honest with you, I would have to support it at a vote because it is good use of the land. Nobody else is going to take it on board, and we need to develop it. And I would have to follow this proposal and vote on. And thank you, Ms. Scholar, for a lovely report. Took me down memory lane.
I've got no other speakers. Can I just say a couple of things on this? You know, there's been the raised about it being housing. Now, bearing in mind, I know some people are not that familiar with members of the crowd with the type of trees that are there and the scale of them. It's very difficult to devise a plan, I would have thought, that could incorporate housing of any scale, permanent housing of a scale, because of the sheer scale of those particular houses, the Wellingtonians and the Redwoods. You know, I personally, having had trees like that, but not close to my home, I would find it quite difficult to live very close to housing of that nature. But in order to get this done, and you know, everybody agrees it's not as it should be at the moment, and could be magnificent. I think that particular area, it's going to cost a lot of money to clear that and develop that. And you know, I just think that from my point of view, it looks as if it's been thought out thoroughly. And that this is probably the only viable way in which you could develop this and make it, you know, you're never going to have social housing on that, because if you had small scale housing, because of the nature of where it would be sited, it would be way beyond the means of most people, irrespective of what was actually placed there. It would become such a desirable site that it would be very expensive by the very nature of it. So I think, you know, there are questions about this, but I hope we can all support it. Thank you. Right, have we any other speakers? None? The officers for comments?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a number of points I would just like to clarify or raise, if that's if you're happy for me to do that, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Fagan, for your detailed commentary. Just to confirm, as was shown on slide 8 of the officer PowerPoint presentation, the pedestrian crossings are tactile and they are part of the improving sort of pedestrian connectivity within the immediate area. In respect to other, I suppose, specific questions in terms of Councillor Stone's question, thank you very much raising your concerns about the play area and sort of future management. Just having a review of the large number of conditions, and I'll come on to that separately, is that there doesn't seem to be sort of an appropriate or sort of a bespoke condition for that. So if members of the committee are agreeable, then officers can add either sort of amend an existing condition to ensure that sort of the maintenance of the play area is covered, or will add a standalone condition for that. In regards to Councillor Bolter's question about affordable housing, as you're probably aware, due to the number of proposed dwellings on this site, it was below the quantum that there's a policy requirement for affordable housing. So there wasn't any requirement for this. And just finally, it was sort of raised yesterday on the site meeting, and again, thank you, Councillor Fagan, about the number of planning conditions. I'm fully aware as the officer, yes, there are a large suite of conditions, but I think in my defence, it is a sort of a mixed-use scheme, as in there's sort of dwellings and holiday lodges, and again, there's a number of conditions which are to secure details, which are pre-commencement, as well as compliance details to ensure, you know, the suitable scheme. So, thank you.
Right, we'll now go to the local members. Councillor Thomas, followed by Councillor Fagan.
First of all, I have to apologise for my manners, because Heather has done a brilliant job on this. It has been very difficult, especially with all these very mature trees. And on that, I think one of the reasons why the application is for these lodges, having spoken to the applicant, these lodges will be on rafts, concrete rafts, so they will not actually go into the ground as such. Obviously, draining has to go in, but I think they've made a very good design on a very difficult site. And I think it's ideal. Talk about the Herefordshire Trail. Well, the Herefordshire Trail actually goes, from what I know, goes up the existing road to a house, and then eventually to the Mind, and then over to Kilpeck. It's fantastic. I've never actually walked it. I've ridden it many, many times as a child on a pony, but it is a beautiful area, and I think a lot of people that will be coming, and I suspect the sales of this these lodges will be very much based upon that walk. Talking about the other accommodation in the area, I know virtually all of it and where it is, because the majority of it is actually in my ward. It's all different. This is a different development altogether to what we've got at present. We're talking about the hills it's actually up on Orcup Hill, but there's pods there. They're different. All the accommodation in that area, it's all quite different. And I don't think it'll have a great deal of pay. HGVs, well, you could, if you wanted to put a condition in on the building that's there, the store that's there, for light industry, I suppose. I don't know. I'd have to put that past the officer. The farm, well, if any of you know how you get up to the farm, HGVs, no. You can get a cattle wagon, small cattle wagon up there, but that is it. It's very, very steep. And also there's another house on the top of the hill, which you have to go up very steep roads. So that's there aren't going to be very many HGVs. So I think that I think really that it's a very, very good design with so many limitations. Yes, it would be nice to have houses. And in fact, actually, there's still an area there which is undeveloped, which is on the north side of the site. There will be an area there that maybe in future they could put some low-cost houses. I don't know. But anyway, I would certainly be very much in favour of this scheme. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Fagan.
Thank you, and thank you, members, for the debate, and to Heather Carlisle also for the report. As everybody said, it's a very complex scheme. I think the issue of the crossings at Wormelo, they remain a concern for me. And whilst I realise that they're tactile, I couldn't actually see the presentation, but essentially, Wormelo needs crossings. It needs proper pedestrian crossings, and a development like this would have been a good opportunity to have got proper pedestrian crossings in. So, that will remain a concern for me long after this development is up and running. I think the issue about affordable housing, yes, it's desperately needed, and it is a shame because the site could have offered more housing, possibly alongside a smaller tourism scheme. But there you go. This is how the application we had before us. What I would request is that proper accommodation of the Herefordshire Trail is made. But, potentially the applicant could look at that, and it would be a good USP for the actual holiday lets. But if we could make sure that the trail is properly provisioned for within the road scheme, the internal road scheme, that would be good. And I also would make an appeal for the play area to be a play area that was accessible for all children, young people in the area. That actually, I know that there's no Section 106 contributions needed, but I think a sort of goodwill gesture towards the community would be could be considered, and to ensure that there is a really good play facility there. But otherwise, you've had your debate. It looks like you've got a motion on the table. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we move on to the vote. We have the proposal in front of us, supported and seconded. Can I ask for those in favour, please indicate. I think that is unanimous, so there are no votes against. Thank you all. Can I now call for a 10-minute adjournment while we comfort break, which we'll now. Can I ask that the live stream has been paused? It's been paused. Thank you. the live stream, we're back on.
No live, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back to the meeting of the Planning Committee. We now move on to item 8. Can I ask that, have we speakers for this particular item? No, we have no speakers. Item 8. Get to the right page. Right, which is proposed non-material amendment to the proposed single-storey garage, including garden, room, office, room stroke office, to allow reduced roof pitch and change of roof finish and stone gable wall to west elevation and return to southward. This is here because of its, I believe, a relation of a council employee, so we have to deal with this in public meeting. Can I ask Mr. Dyer, who's going to deal with this particular item?
Thank you, Chair. Ashwood House is a detached property, 2 stories, located on the northern side of the C1112 at the centre of the village of Stoke Prior, indicated on the screen. Next slide, please. The dwelling is sited within a large residential plot in the village in an area characterised by similar detached properties in the immediate area. Next slide, please. Planning permission was approved in April this year via committee for a 2-storey garden room / office with a connected garage / storage building. This was later revised in September this year, again via committee, to a single-storey garden room / office and connected garage, as you can see on the screen here. Next slide, please. The application today seeks to reduce the angle of the pitched roof and therefore lower the overall height of the building from approximately 4 metres down to approximately 3.5 metres. The application also seeks to change the material of the west elevation gable from wooden boards to stone and also reduce the amount of glazing. While there is an inevitable visual change to the approved scheme, the proposed amendments are considered to be appropriate to the building, the host dwelling and its setting, and would not result in any discernible impact upon the scheme. The amendments reduce the overall impact of the building by lowering the ridge height further, and siting of the approved building means that the proposed changes in materials and glazing are unlikely to be obvious from any public viewpoint. Next slide, please. So the photograph at the bottom on the screen here is an illustration of what the amended plan may look like. With the principle of development having already been established, the decision here is purely as to whether the amendments proposed here are non-material in nature within the meaning of Section 96A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, insofar as to the effect the changes will have on the planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't think we have no speakers. I don't think the local member. Oh, Councillor Baker, sorry. He's the local member. Sorry. He moved. So, Councillor Baker, perhaps you'd like to say anything?
Thank you, Chairman. Members will remember when we debated this originally, I think it was September, and it was approved. These are just non-material amendments to change the shape and colour and materials on the roof. And I certainly have no objections, and I fully support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Are there speakers? Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. Fully in concurrence that this is a non-material amendment. I think it's an improvement, and therefore I have no problem in supporting this and recommend as a motion that we agree. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Second. Any other speakers? Not? Then Officers' comments? No further comments. Can we now move to a vote? Those in favour, please show. No against. Then that is covered. We'll now move on later in the agenda. Perhaps Councillor Baker can take it. Councillor Thomas is leaving as he's declared an interest in the next. Right. Can I now ask members, there is on the agenda to move into confidential session, but that would be only to discuss, if it was named to discuss in any detail, the financial confidential report which you've given within your pack. Now, does anyone wish it to go into confidential session for that particular item? Bearing in mind, no. So we'll remain in comfortable, be conscious of the fact that we need to be careful if we stray into that particular area. So the application is for a sheepcot, St Owen's Cross, Hereford. Proposed erection of a live-work unit for occupation by the applicant and his family in conjunction with the adjoining workshop. We have two speakers. I invite Mr. Campbell and Mr. Thomas to speak on behalf of the applicant. Can you please come forward? Okay. Right. Can I now ask that the officers, sorry. Elsie Morgan is going to make the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to those members who joined on site yesterday morning. Firstly, I draw members' attention to the update sheet, the Parish Council meeting minutes from the 20th of July 2023, showing support for the application was supplied by the applicant's agent. These comments are noted and there's no change to the officer recommendation. The application is made in full and seeks permission for the construction of a detached 4-bedroom dwelling with an adjoining garage and store to the south, associated with a rural business and workshop housed on the site. The site indicated by the red star currently comprises a workshop, associated storage buildings and a static caravan. The site is accessed off the C1234 onto an area of hard standing with hedgerow and trees to the roadside boundary, less substantial vegetation to the west boundary and wire fencing to the north. Next slide, please. In terms of the local context, though the application site is located within a minor linear pattern of development along the road, with dwellings to the east and west, for the purposes of assessing residential development, the site is considered in planning terms to be an open countryside. That is to say, it's divorced from any identified settlement where housing growth is supported in principle. Pencoed lies to the northwest but is not an identified settlement under RA2. The closest settlements are Harewood End, approximately 1.1 kilometres to the northeast, and St Owen's Cross, approximately 2.3 kilometres to the southeast. Next slide, please. This slide shows the existing site and buildings in situ. The principle of development is discussed in detail at paragraphs 6.6 to 6.20 of the committee report. Given the site is located outside of any identified settlement, the proposal falls to be assessed against the exception criteria under policy RA3, which includes dwellings accompanying a rural enterprise in accordance with RA4. This policy permits dwellings where it can be demonstrated that there is a sustained essential functional need for a dwelling and it forms an essential part of a financially sustainable business, and that such need cannot be met in existing accommodation. In core strategy paragraph 4.8.29, non-agricultural rural enterprises should demonstrate that the business could not exist without close and continual supervision. For example, where a worker is required day and night for supervision, inspection or emergency responses. Security itself is not a sufficient reason to justify a new dwelling, but may be a contributing factor. The supporting documentation asserts three main reasons for the justification for a dwelling on the site, these being proper management of the business, reduction in commuting time, and deterrent against thefts. To address these in turn, it is evident that the business has run sufficiently effectively for 10 years in order to financially serve the applicants, and that on-site presence is not required for proper management of the enterprise. To this effect, a dwelling on the site is not required in order for the business to continue to function. Whilst the desire for less commuting time is acknowledged, this is considered a personal preference not to be given weight in policy terms. Secondary to this is the reduced number of vehicle movements required compared to living off-site. Again, this is not considered to be a functional need of the business. Whilst it may be environmentally beneficial to some extent, both local and national policy seek to prevent isolated homes in open countryside locations, as is the case before us. Whilst there would be a trip reduction in terms of commuting to work, the reliance on motor vehicle associated with residential development in unsustainable locations would far outweigh this. Next slide, please. As indicated in the policy commentary, the argument of security itself can be a contributing consideration but cannot alone justify a dwelling in this location. It is acknowledged that isolated rural businesses can be vulnerable to crime, and the supporting documentation provides crime numbers to identify previous burglaries. However, the site is not considered isolated in literal terms, with residential dwellings either side to the workshop. Therefore, this in itself can provide a level of security, with an additional dwelling not being considered to provide any significant additional level of deterrent that cannot be achieved by existing close dwellings. The application has failed to evidence that every reasonable, practical and affordable security measure has been investigated or employed. Notwithstanding this, and most importantly, even if this had been evidenced, security is not in itself sufficient to justify a dwelling in open countryside. There is not considered to be sufficient justification demonstrating that there is a functional need for the occupier to be present at the business for the majority of the time. The nature of this business does not require continual supervision, inspection or emergency responses that would require a permanent occupant on site, and the proposal therefore fails at the first policy requirement for the functional need. Next slide, please. The application site is located within a minor linear pattern of development. As such, the proposal would read as an additional residential unit within this. The existing access would be utilised, minimising visual impact from the roadside. Overall, it's considered to have been demonstrated that the wider landscape impact will be neutral, taking into account the existing built form on the site and in the wider vicinity. No landscaping plan has been provided with the application, and given the in-principle policy conflict, this has not been requested. The proposed dwelling would be a two-storey detached four-bedroom property with home office and adjoining garage. This would be approximately 1.3 metres taller than the workshop on site. The design approach utilises a relatively traditional cottage-style dwelling constructed of timber boarding elevations with stone plinth under grey slate roof. The dwelling would not be overtly out of character with the adjacent built form, comprising a variety of materials and architectural details such as gable projections, dormer windows, and following a generally traditional character. Next slide, please. In terms of residential amenity, the west elevation, which fronts the neighbouring dwelling, proposes no windows, with the exception of obscure glazing to the ensuite shower room and bathroom. Condition could be included to secure obscure glazing in perpetuity. Amended ground floor plans have been received in response to the representation, raising concerns regarding the proximity of the air source heat pump, relocating this from the west of the dwelling to the south. The proposal includes very limited private amenity space to the north, with a paved terrace. Next slide, please. With regards to technical matters, the highway engineer has raised no objection to the scheme, as the proposal is not considered to materially impact on the safety of the existing access, given the current movements associated with the site. Sufficient parking and turning on the site can be achieved and cycle parking provided within the garage. The ecologist has raised no objection to the scheme, and the HRA process undertaken screening out the appropriate assessment. No loss of foraging habitat or impact upon potential bat roosting features has been identified as a result of the brownfield site. Foul water is proposed to be managed through existing private foul water treatment systems, discharging to a drainage field located in the adjacent field. Additional surface water is proposed to be managed through on-site sustainable drainage systems. Next slide, please. To conclude, it's your officer's view that the proposal for a rural workers' dwelling in this open countryside location is found to be without sufficient justification and would lead to significant harm in terms of its conflict with the development plan and promoting unsustainable patterns of development. In considering the three pillars of sustainability, it's acknowledged that there is an economic benefit in supporting a rural enterprise, the applicant asserting that the most salient way to do this is to live on site. While some weight can be given to this argument, it's evident that these policies do not seek to support housing development where it's possible to live off-site and still operate the business. Refusal of this application would not make the business unviable, unable to grow, or hinder the carrying out of operations. As stated in core strategy paragraph 4.8.29, non-agricultural rural enterprises should demonstrate that the business could not exist without close and continual supervision. It's clear that the business can exist without on-site accommodation, as the nature of the operations do not need out-of-hour or emergency presence. The justifications put forward are considered insufficient in policy terms to evidence the threshold for essential functional need is met. In absence of this functional need, the proposal would introduce residential development in an unsustainable location without meeting any exception criteria. Though one journey would be removed to and from place of work, the nature of the unsustainable location outside of any identified settlement would require multiple journeys reliant on private motor vehicle for access to day-to-day services, including healthcare facilities, shops and schools. There are no wider social benefits to the scheme beyond the personal preference of the applicant to reduce commuting time. In absence of functional need on the site, it is considered that accommodation in reasonable distance would enable the family to continue to live in the parish and community. The scheme would therefore not be representative of sustainable development, being located outside of any identified settlement where housing growth is acceptable in principle. This is shown again on the slide for the avoidance of doubt. As a consequence, it does not benefit from the positive presumption set out in the NPPF and core strategy, to which the NPPF is clear that decisions should be taken in accordance with the development plan. Therefore, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Morgan. I'll now go to the public speakers. I invite Mr Campbell and Mr Thomas to speak on behalf of the applicant. You have 3 minutes between you.
Good morning, members. I am the applicant, Guy Campbell. I am a carpenter specialising in bespoke green oak frame structures from my workshop at Sheepcote, Pencoed. I grew up in the parish and attended the local school. My workshop and where I would like to build my family home is on land previously owned by my parents and my grandparents before that. My late father used the land as his builder's yard, and since 2012 I've run the business from my workshop on site but was living in Hereford. As a consequence, I spent too much of my working day commuting between home and work and was unable to manage as I would have liked. Living remotely has also resulted in a lack of supervision, which has led to tools and equipment being stolen from site. That has had a knock-on effect to my business. My wife Kirsty now works locally and our children attend the local school, so moving into the mobile home has been life-changing for my family and has reduced our need to travel for work, and we are closer to a supportive family and the children's school. Being able to respond quickly and effectively to the customer expectations is critical to the business and not merely convenient. I would argue that this and the ability to provide on-site security are genuine and important reasons that justify live-work dwelling being built on site. Approving a dwelling in these circumstances would, in my view, be sustainable. I note from the officer's report that there are no objections to the design and layout of the proposal, highway safety or drainage. Also, members will see the overwhelming level of local support, including from the parish council. I'm under no illusion that the planning permission comes with responsibilities, and I have no hesitation in signing any form of agreement preventing the separate sale of the dwelling from the business. My intent is absolutely genuine, and I hope the members can support this application.
Thank you, Guy. Members should be clear that the NPPF advocates a flexible approach to live-work accommodation and recognises that development to meet rural business needs may have to be found beyond settlements. Paragraph 82 says that planning policies should be flexible enough to accommodate needs not anticipated in the plan to allow for new and flexible working practices such as live-work accommodation. We therefore disagree with the officer report in respect of the weight to go to core strategy policies. The core strategy does not contain a counterpart to paragraph 82, whereby it is silent on the matter of live-work. In these circumstances, members should have regard to the NPPF, which recognises that live-work dwellings will often have to be located outside settlements. It is rare for an application to evoke no objections on technical matters, and we've heard from the applicant that he would expect the dwelling to be tied to the business. We therefore ask members for their support of an application that will transform the lives of the applicants, sustain the local community, and would be entirely in accordance with the NPPF's direction too. Thank you.
No, there we go. The local ward member is Councillor Fagan. She's joining us on Teams. She speaks first and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate. She does not have a vote. She is on MS Teams. You have a 10-minute limit. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, and I probably won't need the full 10 minutes. Can I just confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much to the planning officer for the report, and thank you to the members who managed to come out and have a look at Sheepcote yesterday. I would just like to start my comments by going through one of the comments that were received in support of this application, which I think you've all seen. There's substantial number of supporters of this, and I can confirm that those are local residents. So the comment says, I strongly support this application, and in my view it's important to our local community that it is accepted. The family has history in the area, and the dwelling is within existing buildings with its own access, will have zero impact on the surrounding area or community. Pencoed is a very small community, and we desperately need more young families living here. This is a great opportunity to do just that. Local tradespeople are also vital to the area, and it's important for Guy and his young family that he is able to develop his business from home. So I've used that because it's pretty much what the letters of support are saying, is that actually areas like Pencoed really need to have more young life breathed into them, or they are going to stagnate. You've seen that the parish council supported this application. There was a substantial discussion at the parish council meeting in July around this, and unfortunately due to clerk issues, the submission didn't make it through to the planning office. But they have said that following discussion, councillors voted to support the proposal set out in the application. So looking at why the refusal for a live-work unit on the site is being challenged due to lack of policy hooks within the core strategy, obviously the discussion turns to the National Planning Policy Framework, which states that in paragraph 82, planning policies should be flexible enough to accommodate needs not anticipated in the plan, to allow for new and flexible working practices such as live-work accommodation, and to enable a rapid response to changes in economic circumstances. And I would argue that actually economic circumstances have changed substantially since the pandemic, and also for us to strengthen our communities. That has emerged from the pandemic as well. So the house that this family are proposing is not accommodated by policy in the local plan. So we're looking to the National Planning Policy Framework, and I would just raise your attention to a similar issue which happened in the neighbouring Forest of Dean, where there was a development for a proposed live-work unit, and this one was much more remote than the 1 kilometre outside of Harewood End, which I'll get to Harewood End in a minute. but this was actually in Newnham on 7 in Orr, and while the planning inspector actually did refuse the application in the end, it was to do more with the design issues, because in one of the paragraphs he said the framework, talking about the NPPF, advocates a flexible approach to live-work accommodation and recognises that development to meet rural business and community needs may have to be found beyond settlements. Therefore, little weight is attributed to the inappropriate location of the proposal in the context of the framework. And I think that's a really important point, because what we're talking about here is not whether this house is a sustainable build, or we've got no statutory objections to it, but it is whether the location is inappropriate. And there is accommodation within the NPPF to support the fact that it would be appropriate. So if we look at the 3 pillars of the planning framework, the economic objectives, well, we've heard that this is a viable. We've heard that security issues are really important to the business and a sort of continued threat to this business. We've heard about the social objective, where the framework aims to support strong, vibrant and healthy communities, and also looking at the environmental objective of the framework, which is to protect and enhance natural built historic environment, but also to make the most effective use of land. So this proposal offers a home for a family with very deep roots in its community, on-site security for an financially sustainable local business, and is half a mile from the footpath on the A49, which leads to Harewood End, an hourly bus service to and from Hereford and Ross-on-Wye passes through Harewood End. This is a settlement less than a mile from the site. This is hardly the deepest of Herefordshire countryside. The proposal's for an environmentally sustainable house on a piece of brownfield land, and it has the wholehearted support of the local community. There are some issues with the immediate neighbour, such as the placing of the air source heat pump, which are addressable and, as far as I understand, have been addressed. In my view, this proposal meets the 3 objectives of the National Planning Policy Framework. There is a policy hook for us to use in allowing this development to go forward, and I would hope that you would agree with this. And if our policies do not address the growing needs of our community, then we need to make sure that in our review of the core strategy, we make sure that they do. But in the meantime, we look to the National Planning Policy Framework as a guide. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, if you would like to take your seats back in the public gallery, please. And now I invite debate. I realise that we are slightly depleted at the moment for various reasons. Can I ask for speakers on this particular item? Councillor Sam, then Councillor Baker, followed by Councillor Baker. Sorry. Sorry? Yes, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really torn on this one. I know I shouldn't be in some respects, having listened to what Councillor Fagan said. I would like to support local families in the local area with a local business. I can absolutely see the value to the community and the level of support provided. I do, however, note that there isn't a neighbourhood development plan there, so we do fall back on the core strategy. I am conscious of the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 82, but in terms of the report that Elsie has put together, it was very clear. She put an excellent case for ensuring that we don't have unsustainable development in open countryside. We do need to have a consistent approach to this, and I do note the last committee meeting we were at the Bowlers Lane stables, where we went against officer approval on that one as well for development in open countryside. So I am concerned about precedent being set and that we are ignoring our core strategy. But as you said, there's also the issue of the lack of landscape plan there, and I think the scale of the proposal is out of context with the site space. I think it's a large 4-bedroom, particularly with the attached garage on there, and the orientation of it makes it quite difficult. I am concerned about that and the lack of the landscape plan for any kind of setting of how that fits into with the neighbours. But I do also, can see absolutely every point Councillor Fagan made as ward member. I have read all of the letters of support from the local community, and it's clear that in the absence of the neighbourhood development plan, there is, clear support that would have been there potentially if they had developed a neighbourhood development plan. However, we're falling back on our core strategy, which is clear in Elsie's report that it, is not supported. Anyway, I'd like to hear more debate to see if I can come down one way or another. Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. Useful site visit yesterday. I don't think, having not been there, we wouldn't have been able to understand exactly what was required there. And a very comprehensive report from Miss Morgan. Thank you for that. Because the local parish council haven't produced a neighbourhood development plan, then we can't hold any weight if they were objecting, but of course they're not objecting to it. If they had a neighbourhood development plan, there would have been a written solid settlement boundary to give us some idea as to what is allowed within the area. So I would query the fact that it's not in open countryside because there is no set settlement boundary. Now, if that's agreed with, if there is no settlement boundary and it's not in open countryside, then of course the rules don't apply. And so it depends on, I suppose, on how you look at it and how you view it. And as Councillor Fagan has said quite eloquently, that the NPPF is quite clear that flexibility is not a bad thing and it should be encouraged. This is a tricky one. When we talk about open countryside, there was a photograph came up on the screen. There was an aerial shot of the application site, and it was surrounded by development. It wasn't this isn't an isolated building in the middle of nowhere. This is within a little development. Okay, it will increase the size of it, but I think it could be argued that this really, in the scheme of things, is not really open countryside. And if that is the case, then all we've got to do is decide on whether this building is appropriate. That again is another query. It is a big development, without a doubt, but it would certainly improve the area itself. It's a very untidy site. I think a nice house in there with the removal of the caravan, tidied up, I think it will help to enhance the area. And so at the moment, I'd like to support this application, but then again, the officer's recommendation is to refuse. So we support the officers. It's a tricky one. I'm going to keep my powder dry for the moment.
Sorry, I was going to say I'll put that point. I'll come back.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Councillor Baker covered some of the things I was going to say. As we see in the report, the site is not considered isolated. It is located within a minor linear pattern of development. It is previously developed land. I'm very grateful for the report. It's very detailed, and it's one of those very difficult situations, I imagine, because when you look at the map of this area, not uniquely in Herefordshire, but much more so than in other parts of the country, applying definitions of identified settlements, it's really quite hard because there are so many, as we often see, scattered settlements, farmsteads, very small hamlets, etc. So following on from what Councillor Fagan was saying, personally, I hope that in reference to the NPPF, economic circumstances have changed a lot since it was drawn up. And I personally hope that we can take a flexible approach in terms of development may have to be found beyond settlements. Thank you.
Just on that particular principle, I think that's something that we need to look at in the future with our NPPF is, you know, as at present, if it's not in a settlement boundary, then it's open countryside, and we know that's not the case in many cases, but there we are. We are where we are. Right, any other speakers? None? Can I just, we have no proposal in front of us, so.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
want to have a quick sort of recap on what that policy proposals mean. So your adopted local plan, I know I've got the paper copy and you're very jealous, but has listed in policy RA2, it lists, there's two sections. You've got the list of settlements that are considered to be where the main focus of proportionate housing development are, and then you have some of these smaller settlements where other settlements where proportionate housing is appropriate. And I know we've had conversations many times in this arena whereby we're talking about some of these villages that are listed, not necessarily having all the facilities and being sustainable for growth. And that's a discussion we've had before. However, as Elsie put on the plan quite clearly, this particular cluster of dwellings is not listed as a settlement in either that paragraph 4.14 as main settlements or paragraph 4.15 for small settlements. So we're not talking about where that settlement boundary lies because it isn't classed as a settlement in the first place. It's not unusual in this county to have clusters of linear development along a road across the whole county. And you know and those areas are considered to be open countryside. It's a well-established principle, and that is what the report has done and explained to you step by step in terms of that decision. It's not an RA2 settlement. We then look at RA3, and RA3 directs us to RA4, and that's the assessment that your officer has done. Turning to the NPPF and paragraph 82, which says planning policies should. And this is part of the building a strong and competitive economy section of the NPPF. So it's asking that our planning policy should, and as you said, be flexible enough to accommodate needs not anticipated in the plan and allow for new and flexible working practices such as live-work accommodation and to enable a rapid response to changes in those economic circumstances. Again, that's part of that economic side of things. But that doesn't mean you put aside the policies on the previous page which talk about rural housing. It doesn't mean you put aside the policies in relation to the local plan which directs where housing should be accommodated and the sustainability arguments of on those aspects as well. It doesn't mean you need to put aside those policies. You can take them take into account everything that's been said. That's correct, but you don't put aside. So we go back to those principles. The local plan is an adopted local plan. The paragraph 80 of the NPPF supports and is consistent with that approach. And so it's just really making you aware that you don't put aside the rural housing, which is a very relevant section of the NPPF, in terms of another paragraph which allows some flexibility. And I think it's about also, is it, whether it's a rural enterprise, and that's what, the report has set that out quite clearly, and you should take that into account as to whether that live work unit, is there a functional need for that rural enterprise to be on the site. Thank you.
Councillor Baker, do you want to come in? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. If St Owen's Cross is that little development, if it's not listed as RA2 or 3, then can it not be listed under the local group parish, Lanwan or something similar? Which I imagine does fall into RA2.
If they had decided to go ahead, apologies, my ignorance on the neighbourhood development boundaries here, but if they had decided to go ahead and create and to adopt a neighbourhood development plan, it would need to be in general conformity with the core strategy. So to identify settlements at that point, which are not included in the core strategy, it probably would have fallen at that point. So it would have fallen down at that point when then being examined to say it has to be in general conformity with the development plan. It would have been challenged at that point if they had gone ahead with the neighbourhood plan. Obviously, we're not in that situation, so we are falling back to our adopted local plan, which clearly identifies where development is where housing is acceptable.
I know some large group parishes, they have settlement boundaries, quite distinct settlement boundaries within that parish. And I was wondering if Glenwan Group Parish Council did have a neighbourhood development plan, would St Owen's Cross form a small settlement on its own?
St Owen's Cross is listed. This isn't St Owen's Cross.
Is it not? It's on the application.
So can we go back to that first slide that was, or the last slide, whichever it is. It's on there quite a few times by the sounds of it.
Just above your head there, it says St Owen's Cross.
That's their address, yeah.
St Owen's Cross is a little bit away.
So if you go to the next one, please.
It's on the report.
It's just an area.
It's in between Pencoed and
Could confuse a stupid person, I'll tell you. Yeah.
So
it's difficult. I'm sorry. I apologise for being dim, but I'm trying to. It's a fence sitting at the moment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. NPPF paragraph 80E was it mentions if it would significantly enhance its immediate setting. Is this maybe something we could take into account?
So in terms of, well, I mean, we can, in terms of looking at all of those steps through policy, of that policy, then if it's significantly, we go back to the principles of whether or not it's got a functional need in that respect anyway. But is there an essential need for a rural worker? Development represents an optimal, viable or use of a heritage asset, or would be appropriate for enabling development. The development would be the reuse of redundant or disused buildings and enhance its immediate setting. In terms of looking at, would you say paragraph E or? E. Okay, so that is that the design is of exceptional quality, and in that it is truly outstanding, reflecting the highest standards of architecture, and would help to raise standards of design more generally in the rural area, and would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area. They haven't promoted this scheme on the basis of that sort of truly outstanding design, and we would approach it in a different way in that respect. So you have to take all of those parts together. You can't just lift the one part. Yeah, but part E's got two parts to it. Well, yeah.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very difficult one. I understand exactly where the officers have come from and totally agree with the report. And I'm just looking at any ways of mitigating the outcome without being too confrontational. I was looking at policy E2 with the redevelopment of existing employment land and buildings as a potential option. And the other one was home working, although the home working specifies more of a residential property being used for commercial purposes as opposed to commercial land, which is more the redevelopment of existing employment land and buildings. And I wondered if that would help us alleviate this issue. Kelly, you're looking at me like I've just...
No good looking.
I think we go back to those principles. There is support for economic. I mean, we've outlined there's support, so there's clear support in terms of the economic side of things. It's the residential element. You go back to those rural housing policies across all the documents, whether that's the NPPF or the core strategy. So that's the documents that you're looking at in terms of the rural housing element. I don't think we haven't said there's not going to be an economic benefit. I think we've made that point clear that is something you can take into account. But those policies are about redevelopment of existing land and buildings, and as you said, it's about the economic use there, as opposed to you still need to consider the introduction of the residential side of things. As to why that's. We've clearly explained the reasons we've come to the conclusions that we have. I'm not quite sure. I'm not looking for ways to overcome that per se. I understand what you're saying. We understand that there is an economic benefit to that side of things.
Councillor Baker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My last turn.
Famous last words.
What concerns me is that if we refuse this application, then there is a good chance that this local business will collapse, because if the applicant loses any more equipment due to nighttime burglary, etc., he won't be able to afford to carry on. The fact that this type of business doesn't really need people on site per se, but the fact that there is a house there with lights on and possibly an alarm system, etc., might well deter the less than committed burglar. But it's a worry I've got that if we lose this business, then other businesses may well collapse as well, and then we would be the bad guys according to the local population. And so my case rests.
Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. I think, taking the mood of the room, we're all sort of looking at a way of taking this forward for the applicant. I take on board us who has done a wonderful job in doing everything professionally and correctly. But we're arguing around really, or debating, I should say, about a word, flexibility. And how do you use the flexible part of it? If we're not going to use flexibility, take it out of the equation. But we're talking about being flexible and making a judgment on being flexible. Nothing else. We're all thinking about, yeah, it looks a reasonable suggestion, but the planning committee the planning officer has done everything by the board in the correct way, and I wholly support that. But then we look at it and we have to make other decisions, and it's that flexibility, the word that comes in. I'll say no more on it. I'm torn between it, to be perfectly honest. But if there isn't a flexibility, what's the point of having our committee? To look at things from a slightly different angle, is my point. I'm saying we look at it and say, is there flexibility in what we do, or do we say the letter of the law is the letter of the law? Thank you.
Kelly? Gibbons?
The purpose of the planning committee is to carry out, obviously, the function of the deciding the planning committee again with, in terms of taking into account and that your starting point is your local plan, and if there's any other material considerations. The purpose of the planning committee is not to be flexible for those applications. It's to look at look at it in the round, to look at it in terms of it's the local plan and any other material considerations, and that you can make your judgment and you can make your decision based on that. So again, the report has given you quite clearly our position in terms of what the local plan says, and that that should be your starting point in making a decision.
Not a criticism on any of the team, Kelly, please don't take that. But because there is this word in, that's why I brought it forward.
Yes. Can I say there is an issue in rural areas about security. I've just had my local mechanic, agricultural commander, lose £25,000 worth of equipment. because he's not on site. But I mean, that doesn't. There's nothing in in our plans that cover that sort of thing, you know, and that's something that's very difficult. And we're always wary of people who will use that for the wrong reasons. But that is justification. But it is an issue. They took also they abandoned the quad bike as well. So anyway. Right, are there any other speakers? I have no recommendation.
I'm going to take my life in my hands,
sorry.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry? Sorry, did you...
Well, I agree with everything Councillor Fagan said. I know it's a difficult thing, and I know Elsie's done a marvellous job. But local people staying in a local area with their own businesses should be encouraged. I don't mind what the rest say. But I hope we can find a way to support this, because they deserve to have a home on the site with the security that they deserve. So I shall be minded to support it. Thank you very much.
You promised you wouldn't come back, Councillor Baker, but typical damn politician.
I've got previous. I'm going to say that with serious apologies to the officers, I'm going to support, I'm not going to support the recommendation. I will support approval of the recommendation, or rather of the application. And I do apologise, and I won't be on their Christmas card list anymore. Probably not that I ever...
What supposes that you were ever on the card list as well? Is that seconded? Right. Pardon? Sorry.
Was that a proposal?
So that's a proposal.
Proposal for approval.
Approval, right. Right.
And
sorry, we'll go perhaps to the, if there are no further speakers, and Councillor Burkus promises not to speak again.
And I'm going to need him to in a minute.
Yeah, all right. Right.
Please, can you provide me with clear reasons for your proposal to approve? Okay. Do you want to?
My colleague over there might know.
Do you want to adjourn then for a minute, or how does that?
I think we've got to have reasons before we.
Can we use the those bits? What were they? Those parts of the MPPF that we've been discussing. Can we use that as our reason? The flexibility part.
Yes, can our legal officer will give us wisdom.
As Kelly has stated, it's really important if you're going to approve the application that you give you detailed reasons as to why you feel that contrary to policy it is acceptable. And the reason you need to do that is if you don't, you put yourselves open to the risk of a claim for judicial review, because you need to be able to back up your decisions. So you need to say why you feel that it's okay to accept this, even though it's contrary to policy, and give you and set those reasons out in bullet points. So all the matters that you've raised during your discussion, if you need to put those into reasons and detail those, so that they can be noted and minuted in the committee report.
Well, we can certainly use part of the NPPF. We can also use part. There must be something in our core strategy that mentions local business and supporting local business and local rural businesses.
I think my suggestion would be that I think the best way for you to approach it would be to say, although you accept that the core strategy and the MPPF says this, you wish to approve for these reasons, and set out what those reasons are. So why you feel that you're going to go contrary to the core strategy, contrary to the MPPF, and approve it in spite of those, because you feel that there are reasons why you feel that those are overridden. So it's not about looking for something else, It's about saying why you feel the core strategy and the NPPF are overridden in this instance on the merits of this application.
I'm going to propose something now, that we have a 5-minute break while members discuss their position on this particular matter. Informally, those, the proposers. We've done it before. 5 minutes break. Can we pause the live stream, please? Right, can I now, please, can we have quiet, please? Members, I think we're going to reconvene. Can I ask that the live stream is back on? Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. I'm sorry we delayed this, but we had to take legal advice and planning advice on the legalities of various proposals. Can I now ask for a proposer and seconder and the reasons for their proposal?
I propose that the application is approved, and we accept that the policy that this is contrary to policy. But we have agreed that in order to support local business, this matter should be approved. It will prevent further crime at the site, more especially nighttime burglaries. We've looked at NPPF policy 80E.2 that mentions enhancing the immediate setting. And paragraph 82D, the application should be flexible enough to accommodate the needs not anticipated in the plan. If any colleagues have any additional, I'd be happy to hear them. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Oh yes, and also the need for officers to delegate for conditions.
Oh, indeed.
Yes, that be covered as well. Right, Ms. Gibbons and Ms. Morgan, do you wish to say anything?
I think it's just to obviously remind officers, as I've remind councillors, as I've said before, about the the weight of the local plan and the national planning policy framework, and I think we've probably covered all of that on a number of occasions. So nothing further to add. I suppose the only other element to add was how whether or not the dwelling should be controlled and tied to the unit. I know they offered a legal agreement in that respect, and whether or not you wanted to have a legal agreement or condition that tied the business to the dwelling.
I would certainly support tied to the business, but of course if the business was, I don't know, demolished or whatever, but I'm sure that we can write something in
Is that they shouldn't be sold separately,
Yes, indeed.
sold or operated separately.
Yeah, no, I support that.
Councillor Selms.
Reading the room, if it's minded to go against the officer's recommendation with regard to delegated, I'd like to see some landscape planning to make sure that the setting of that development has tried to mitigate the impact on the neighbour in terms of and the frontage of the property, and also the views across behind where the caravan is sited to the wider countryside. I think there's a need for some serious landscape setting there to try and mitigate the impact of what is quite a large building that will be on an elevated level because the ground has been made up onto a pad there. Thank you.
And now I'll go to the local member, Councillor Fagan, who will have the final say on this matter.
Well, thank you, councillors, and thank you for the debate. I do not have any more of these up my sleeve. I can assure you I'm not going to become a prolific
Offender. Is the word.
Offender, yes. But thank you for the debate. It's interesting. I mean, my personal view is that in the review of our core strategy, we need to really take into account the diverse needs of our rural economy, and that to make sure that we actually have proper provision for the changing economic landscape, because RA4 only deals with agricultural, forestry and rural enterprises, and I'm not entirely sure what a rural enterprise is, and I suspect that sort of as we move on, rural enterprises change. And I think that the issue of live-work accommodation is going to be increasingly more important. And I think that in terms of how we keep our small communities vibrant, that enabling organic growth is really, really important. Just to say something about the NDP, that Llanwarn Parish Council, which is a group of parish councils, has agreed to relook at the issue of an NDP. But again, you know, whether that would have even helped in this situation, I'm not entirely sure. But otherwise, just to thank you for your discussion and for the apologies for the tension that I've caused you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have a proposer and seconder for a recommendation as outlined by Councillor Baker. Can I ask for those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions? 3. That is covered. Carried, sorry. Right. Thank you all. Can I now ask that we go to the closed session, which that under the section 100A, little 4, the Local Government Act, to move that the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business.